My name is Emery. I'm 30 years old, living and working in Chicago. Last week, my mother called and said just one sentence. You should move out before the weekend. Hannah and Brad are moving back in. No explanation. No hesitation. I stood in the house I had bought and renovated myself, listening to my own mother tell me that I no longer had a place in what used to be my home. Have you ever been stripped of your place by your own family simply because you weren't the one they favored? Have you ever been pushed to the sidelines with no one even glancing back? If you've ever been hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you, leave a comment below. Hit like if you've ever had to pick yourself back up after betrayal. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear what happened next, because what followed that call was worse than the call itself. I didn't leave immediately after that phone call. I stood frozen in the living room, still holding my phone, eyes fixed on the photo on the fireplace mantel, a picture of our family at Christmas 10 years ago. Hannah sat in the middle, her arm draped around Mom, wearing that perfect white smile and the hairstyle Mom always said looked elegant. And me, off to the left side, nearly cut out of the frame by the Christmas tree's shadow. I remembered I had set up that tree, hung the lights, prepared the table, cleaned the whole house that afternoon. But in the one photo that remained, I looked like an outsider. I wasn't jealous. I was just tired. Tired of the familiar feeling, being forgotten, treated like I didn't exist no matter how hard I tried. Growing up, Hannah was always the family pride. She wasn't a bad person, at least not in front of others. Hannah knew how to speak at the right time, smile the right way, and please everyone. She didn't need to try too hard. Her mere presence drew attention. My mother seemed enchanted by the light Hannah gave off. Every minor achievement of hers was something Mom bragged about to the neighbors. She was invited to speak at school. She's been an honor student 2 years in a row. Her boyfriend's studying law. And me? I remember one time my mother mentioned me at a parent-teacher conference just to say, Emery is sweet, but too quiet. She needs to open up, more like her sister. As I got older, the gap between my mother and me grew more obvious. Everything I did, graduating with honors, earning a scholarship on my own, working jobs to cover tuition, even buying this house with my first salary, was met with polite nods. That's nice. Keep trying. Meanwhile, Hannah changed her hair color, and Mom would gush, "Oh my, you look 10 years younger." I used to think Mom favored her because she was more fragile. Hannah once cried her eyes out after a breakup, while I simply cleaned the apartment and went to bed. But slowly I realized it wasn't about who was more fragile. It was about who made Mom feel proud in front of others. Hannah always showed up on cue, dressed exactly how Mom liked, said just the right words to make Mom feel like a successful parent. I didn't. I never had the flowery words. I just knew how to work hard and keep going. There was one night when I was 13. Hannah broke Mom's favorite antique vase. I heard the crash from the living room, the sound of shattering porcelain. I ran downstairs and saw her standing among the shards, hands trembling. My mom rushed in, looked at the scene, then looked straight at me. Emery, what did you do? Before I could speak, Hannah said, I'm sorry, but I think she dropped it while dusting. Mom didn't ask any questions, didn't look back. She just told me to go get the broom. I've never forgotten the feeling of standing amid that mess, tears burning my eyes as I swept up every piece, while Hannah was wrapped in a hug, gently consoled. Later, Mom said, it's just a vase, as long as you're okay. Like I wasn't even there. Like I was invisible. And it wasn't just one time. One year I got into a prestigious summer internship program in New York, an extremely rare opportunity for a sophomore marketing student. I called home, excited to share the news, but Mom only asked, what about Hannah? Is she going too? When I said Hannah didn't apply because she wasn't eligible, Mom sighed. Just make sure you take care of yourself. It's probably tough over there. I learned not to expect too much. I told myself not everyone shows love the same way, but sometimes silence hurts more than rejection. When I was denied a promotion, when I ended a 7-year relationship, even when I had my appendix removed and had to take a taxi home alone, Mom still called Hannah to chat about her new job and possible raise. You're not the type to make a fuss, Mom once told me when I asked why she never stood up for me. Hannah's more delicate. You're strong. I trust you'll handle things. But being strong doesn't mean not needing love. Being strong is not a license to be left behind. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped trying to be seen. Maybe it was on my 26th birthday when Hannah got a diamond necklace from Mom and I got a last-minute greeting card. Or maybe it was when I called to tell her I bought this house and she said, "Why not put both your names on the deed for convenience?" Whenever it was, it built up like tiny cuts. No one noticed, but they kept piling on, until one day they ripped wide open. The day my mother told me to leave. No hesitation, no apology, just coldness, as if I were a stranger passing through whose time had run out. And in that moment, aching yet strangely calm, I realized I had nothing left to lose, except myself. I moved out on a chilly Saturday morning, though spring had already begun to bloom. I didn't take much. Just a few boxes of books, a suitcase of clothes, and a small ceramic vase I'd made during my final year in college. Everything I needed, I packed in one morning. Everything else, the family photos on the walls, the armchair where Hannah used to read magazines, the compliments meant for someone else, I left behind. Mom wasn't home when I started packing, but she returned just as I was sealing the last box. She stood in the doorway, sunlight catching her face, making her expression unreadable. Not angry, not sad, no attempt to stop me. "How long are you planning to be gone?" she asked, in the same tone someone might ask about the weather. "Depends," I replied, eyes still on the last labeled box. "Maybe a while." She nodded like that made perfect sense. No stay, no emotion. I almost laughed at how casual she was. Maybe I really had just been a house guest for the past 7 years. Not her daughter. The small moving van I rented idled in the driveway, its engine humming against the midday quiet. I rolled the final box outside and opened the trunk. Just then the front door opened again. Hannah stepped out, neat white dress, hair in a bun, coffee in hand, like she was heading to a spa, not watching her sister move out. "Oh, so it's finally the grand finale," she said, sipping her drink with a faint smile. "At least Mom won't have to stress so much anymore." I looked at her without blinking. No anger, no argument. I had learned not to react. Because every time I did, they called me too sensitive. Then Brad came out, hands in his pockets, hair still damp, the smell of fresh aftershave thick in the air. "Hey, he said, emphasizing the childhood nickname Hannah used to tease me with. "Pack it up quick, will ya? We need the driveway. Our new car's white, matches the front of the house." Hannah chuckled. "Brad, stop it. Don't be mean," but there wasn't a hint of real protest in her voice. I placed the last box into the van and closed the trunk. When I turned back, Mom was standing on the steps, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. "Make sure to check the water and electric bills. Don't forget to pay them on time," she said. Not like advice, more like a reminder of obligation. I nodded. I opened the driver's door, then paused for a second, glancing back at the house I had painted wall by wall, installed every light switch, fixed every loose kitchen tile when Hannah moved out 4 years ago. Back then, I thought, finally, a space of my own. But it turned out I was just a placeholder for someone else's happiness. Brad whistled a short tune, then muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Lock the door tight, don't blame us if stuff goes missing." Hannah lightly tugged on his sleeve, but said nothing. I sat down, gripping the steering wheel while my heart felt crushed under an invisible weight. I didn't cry, I wasn't angry either, but something inside me cracked. A fracture that made no sound, yet ran deep and quiet. The car rolled away from the familiar brick-paved street. In the rearview mirror, I saw 3 figures standing on the front porch, like strangers waving off a passing guest. No one waved, no one called out, and none of them watched me go. I arrived in the Lakeview neighborhood in the early afternoon. The apartment I'd rented was on the 3rd floor of a charming old red brick building with wooden stairs and rows of maple trees outside the windows. It wasn't large, but it was peaceful. It wasn't luxurious, but it gave me room to breathe. The landlord, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, had a warm smile and a slow, calm voice. When she handed me the keys, I smiled in return, my eyes still blurry from the afternoon light pouring in. "Are you living alone?" she asked gently. I nodded. Yes, just me. It wasn't the first time I'd lived alone, but it was the first time I did so without anything tying me down. No more wondering what my mother would think, what Hannah might say, or whether Brad would make another joke behind my back. Here, I was just me. No one to avoid, no one to please. I opened the apartment door. The scent of old wood and the soft glow of warm light filled the space. In that moment, I didn't feel proud or broken. I just felt intact. And sometimes, that's enough to start over. My first days in the new apartment passed quietly. No sound of Hannah's heels on hardwood floors, no voice reminding me to make room for your sister, no Brad cracking awkward jokes that made me want to disappear from the dinner table. Just the tick of the clock on the wall and the sunlight quietly slipping across the windowsill every morning. At first, the silence was disorienting, but over time, it became something I cherished. I began waking up earlier, not out of duty to anyone, but because I wanted to. I made coffee, sat at the small table by the window, and watched people trickle onto the street. Each morning looked the same, yet felt brand new. I was living for myself. At work, I returned with a different mindset. No longer the girl trying to impress someone or hoping for a rare compliment from my mother. I worked because I loved what I did. I was a mid-level manager in the marketing department of a wellness and lifestyle company, demanding work but where I had first discovered my passion. During my first week after moving out, my boss, Chandler, called me into his office. He placed a thick folder on the desk and said, "We're restructuring the main campaign for next quarter. I need someone with a new perspective. I think that person is you." I paused for a few seconds, not out of surprise, but because I finally felt seen. Not as someone's copy, not a shadow trailing behind my sister, but me, Emery, the one who had quietly worked hard for years. I took on the project with every ounce of dedication and experience I had. Each idea sketched on the whiteboard, each slide in my pitch deck came from something I knew intimately. People need to feel heard. They need to feel seen. I didn't just want to sell a product. I wanted to tell a story that made people feel connected. I spent more nights than usual at the office, not because I was forced to, but because I genuinely wanted to prove to myself I could build something that mattered. Some nights I worked through a cup of instant noodles. Other times I'd stop by the small coffee shop on the corner to write in the quiet. It didn't matter where, as long as I was doing what I loved. Along the way, I enrolled in a personal development course on weekends, just a small class of about 10 people, but it was the first place where I stood up and introduced myself without saying Hannah's sister or Linda's daughter. I simply said, "I'm Emery. I'm finding my way back to myself." There, I met Ava, an interior designer recently divorced after 18 years of marriage, and Carla, a single mom going back to college at 45. Their stories made me realize so many people were learning to stand again after life knocked them down, and they didn't need to explain whether it was right or wrong. Each week, we shared our little victories. I talked about Chandler mentioning me in a company White's meeting. Ava shared how she designed her first solo apartment with no husband's interference. Carla beamed as she told us her daughter had hugged her and said, "Mom, you're a superhero." Among these once broken people, I didn't feel out of place. I felt understood, and I wasn't ashamed to speak about the things that had once hurt me. I started journaling again, writing down feelings, fears, and even tiny joys I used to ignore because I was too busy to feel. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I was reading a book on brand storytelling in the park when my phone buzzed. It was Chandler. "I just called to say one thing," he said quickly. "Your campaign, it's approved. Senior leadership is beyond impressed. Emery, you did an incredible job." I exhaled, pressing my lips together. "Thank you. I'll keep working hard." "You don't need to push any harder," Chandler replied. "Just keep being yourself." I hung up and watched the late-day sun filter through the trees. That feeling. It wasn't like winning a contest, it felt like stepping out of a box I'd been stuck in for too long and realizing no one had to open it. I could open it from the inside. Around that same time, I started getting messages from people I never expected to hear from again. A former colleague who once doubted me sent congratulations. A college professor invited me to speak at a fall seminar, and a nameless text from an unknown number. Saw your name listed as lead presenter. Good for you. I didn't need to guess who it was. I didn't respond, not out of arrogance, but because I was busy living my own life. A life no longer spent quietly enduring, a life where every step I took was mine alone. One late June afternoon, while I was arranging materials for a client meeting the following week, my phone rang. The screen showed the name of someone I no longer had saved as mom, just a string of numbers. I stared at it for a moment before answering. Hello? Her voice was the same, slow, steady, with no polite opening. Hannah and Brad are coming to Chicago this weekend, she said, like announcing a change in weather. They want to stop by your apartment. I'm coming too. I paused. My pen froze on the notepad. Why my apartment? I asked, clearly surprised. Well, I heard you're doing well lately. Hannah's curious to see where you live, just for fun. For fun? I repeated, my voice low but sharp enough to slice through the still air. You want them to visit my home, where I live. Because? You're curious? I mean, well, it's a chance to reconnect, to warm things up. She paused, then added, more softly, you're not still upset about all that, are you? I inhaled deeply, keeping calm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't healed either. But I didn't want her to think she had the right to walk into what I had rebuilt from wreckage. Fine, I said after a long pause. Sunday afternoon. But let me know what time. I'm not free all day. Sunday afternoon. I had everything cleaned up by morning, not to impress them, but because I didn't want anyone stepping in and thinking I lived half-finished. I brewed a pot of mint tea, set out glass cups on the table. The fridge held a tray of homemade cookies, respectable enough for guests, but the air in my chest didn't feel as light as the tea. The doorbell rang at 10 minutes to 4. I walked slowly to open it, taking a deep breath. Standing in front was my mother, wearing her familiar green silk scarf, her eyes scanning everything from the doorway like she was already making judgments. Hannah stood beside her in a tight dress and high heels, smiling as if she were walking into a luxury real estate showing. Brad looked the same. Shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hands in his pockets, eyes drifting around like he was appraising the apartment's value. But there was someone else. Behind them, slightly separated from the group, stood a man I had never seen with my family. Light gray suit, tall build, neatly combed graying hair, eyes sharp but composed. I frowned. Sorry, and you are... Brad laughed out loud. Oh, almost forgot to introduce. This is Mr. David Klein, the new CEO of the Osanra Group. We met him at the sponsor gala last week, and guess what? He's the one reviewing the media campaign your company is running. I froze. That name wasn't unfamiliar. David Klein, the head of the group my company was currently partnering with, the same man who attended last Friday's internal meeting. Someone I'd never met in person, but had read plenty of files on. David nodded politely. Pleasure to meet you, Emery. It started to click. This wasn't just a casual visit. Hannah hadn't come over just to hang out. They wanted to see how I lived, and maybe influence the work I'd poured everything into building. Please, come in, I said politely, opening the door. Have a seat. The tea's fresh. My mother stepped in first, eyes sweeping past the window, bookshelf, and a framed photo of me with my weekend class group. No sign of approval. Just silence, as always. Hannah followed, smoothing her dress as she sat on the couch like it was a waiting chair at a private clinic. Brad picked up a teacup, sniffed it, then set it down without taking a sip. Only David seemed genuinely observant. He moved slowly, taking in the small details. The project board by my desk, the color-coded file trays, the printer next to the bookshelf. Then he turned to me. Do you work from home often? He asked, not interrogating, just taking note. I'm heading the new client campaign for our marketing division. A lot of it happens at night, so I built out a dedicated workspace here. David gave a small nod, his eyes steady. I didn't look away. I didn't perform. I simply stood upright, hands lightly clasped, voice calm. Brad chuckled. That's her. Super dedicated. Sometimes a bit obsessive. Hannah says if Emery's working on a deadline, not even an earthquake would move her. Mom chuckled softly. Hannah smiled in agreement. I only glanced briefly. No reaction. No need. I had long since stopped trying to explain I wasn't the weird sister who just works all the time. David set down his cup and looked directly at me. I was very impressed with the strategic report you submitted last week. The way you integrated consumer behavior with digital feedback loops is rare in our current cohort. I nodded slightly. Thank you. That came from 6 weeks of market research and iterative segmentation. Brad snorted. Sounds exhausting. David didn't laugh. He looked at Brad like he'd just confirmed something, then turned back to me. I look forward to discussing more with you during next week's extended session. I replied evenly. I'd be glad to present further insights on behavioral data integration. David nodded, politely shook hands, then excused himself. Once the door shut behind him, the room fell silent. Hannah sipped her tea, eyeing me. Didn't think you were the type to get cozy with someone like him. Felt unnatural. I turned to her and answered gently. You're right. I didn't need to get cozy with anyone to earn recognition. The corner of Hannah's mouth twitched downward. My mother turned toward the window. Brad shrugged like he didn't get it. As for me, I stayed seated, realizing I didn't need to say anything else, because everything that needed to be said was already written in David Klein's eyes the moment he stepped into that apartment. When the door closed behind David Klein, the apartment suddenly felt strangely cramped. Not because of the number of people, but because of the heavy tension building quietly between faces that should have felt familiar. I walked over to the table, poured more tea into my cup, and moved with steady calm. But inside, I could feel my chest tightening like a drum pulled too tight for too long. How long have you and Brad known Mr. Klein? I asked, not looking at anyone in particular. Last week, Hannah answered quickly, cool as ever. Charity fundraiser. He was the main sponsor. How convenient, I said, nodding slightly. Right when my company's in strategic partnership with Osenra, and he just happens to be invited to my apartment. My mom chimed in, her tone almost instructional. I didn't know your work had anything to do with him. I thought it was just a social visit. I actually saw it as a good thing. I smiled faintly. A social visit in the apartment I pay for with my own salary. And my sister and brother-in-law just happened to bring the CEO of our partner firm into that space, look at my workspace, glance at my planning board, like they're quietly evaluating me with a narrative already in mind. Hannah crossed her arms. You're overthinking. Nobody has time for that. You're right, I said, meeting her gaze. But you've done something similar before. When your media firm nearly collapsed back in 2021, who stayed up 2 nights rebuilding the pitch deck for your investors? Me. Who allowed their name on your ad accounts, took on legal risk after your operational ban from the lawsuit? Also me. And when you presented, you introduced me as your technical assistant. My mother gripped her hands tighter. Hannah frowned, then said, You agreed to help. I did, because I thought that's what family did. I never asked for credit. But at the very least, don't come back after 2 years and try to undermine the one thing I built on my own. Brad chuckled lightly. Undermined? That's dramatic. I turned to him. You think I don't know? That anonymous email sent to our recruitment department last month accusing me of breaching a past NDA? That information only existed in the private files Hannah kept back when I supported her. Who else could have sent it if not someone in this family? Hannah shot up from her seat, her voice rising. You're making stuff up, imagining things. I stood too, slowly, without raising my voice. I don't need to imagine. I have proof. The email's IP matches the network from Mom's old apartment. It was sent at 11:32 a.m., right when you said you were getting your hair done all day. And the attachment? It was the draft contract I wrote with formatting errors, only I would recognize. Mom stayed silent. Hannah took a half step back, but her face stayed defiant. So what if I sent it? I was just trying to warn them about your impulsive personality. Let them be cautious. I did it for the good of your company. I stared at her for a long time, as if trying to peer into a crack I had spent years pretending not to see. No. You did it because you're afraid. Afraid I'm no longer the quiet shadow beside you. Afraid I can stand on my own, and when that happens, your light alone won't be enough to dazzle anyone anymore. Hannah clenched her jaw. You're always playing the victim. No, I said slowly. I stopped being the victim the day I packed my things and left that house without looking back. But you and Mom have never gotten used to me not being fragile anymore. My mother finally spoke. I just want you two to love each other. I never forced anyone. I turned to look at her. You didn't have to force anything. You just stayed quiet every time I was pushed into the background. You defended her in everything, even when it meant abandoning me. The room fell quiet. No excuses left, no denial strong enough to cover the truth. I didn't need them to admit anything, because by now I understood sometimes silence is the clearest confession of all. I pulled out a small envelope from the drawer and placed it on the table. Here's the email copy and system access logs. I'm not sending it to the company, but I won't let anyone interfere with my work again. Brad looked down at the envelope, then glanced at Hannah. She said nothing. My mother stared at me with an unfamiliar look, as if she didn't recognize the woman standing before her. I didn't need them to understand everything. I just needed them to know. I saw it all now. My mom didn't react right away. She stared at the envelope like it was something foreign, then slowly leaned back in her chair, her gaze not fixed on any of the three of us. The room grew so quiet I could hear the wall clock counting every second, stretching the tension. Why did you do it? I asked. My voice wasn't loud. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired enough to need an explanation, just to know I wasn't crazy. Wasn't some lunatic acting out an old role no one in the family cared to watch. My mother pressed her lips together. After a long pause, she spoke, slowly and softly, like every word had to fight its way through the air. Because I didn't want you to live under the same pressure your sister did. I blinked. Pressure? I was pushed out of the house. I got slanderous emails sent to my company. That's how you protect me from pressure? I just didn't want you to get hurt when things didn't turn out the way you hoped. She looked directly at me. Something real in her eyes. You've always tried too hard. I thought if you kept chasing big dreams, you'd fall harder than Hannah. Your sister knows when to stop. But you keep going farther. I stood there, stunned, not because her words were harsh, but because they hit a truth I never expected. You were afraid I'd succeed? I asked, barely believing the words coming out of my mouth. I was afraid you'd go so far you wouldn't need me anymore. Her voice was thin as thread. You've always been too independent, Emery. I never figured out how to hold on to you. So you chose to break me? My voice cracked like a dam giving way. Anna turned slightly. She didn't mean to. She just didn't know how not to be left behind. I turned to her. And what about you? Are you afraid I'll surpass you, or afraid people will see you're not as perfect as Mom always claimed? Hannah stayed silent. Her eyes drifted away, landing on a small crooked painting on the wall, where the early summer light had just touched. She always knew how to hide at moments like these. And Mom always defended her with logic that sounded both painful and hollow. I don't need you to stop me from falling, I said, my eyes fixed on Mom. What I needed was someone to help me up, or at the very least, just sit next to me while I was down. Mom clenched her hands, trembling. I didn't know how. I was never taught how to love a child who didn't match what I imagined. I let out a laugh, soft, but heavier than any tears I'd ever cried. So you chose to love the one who is easier to be proud of, the one more like you, the one you could brag about. Amory, her voice broke. It's okay, I interrupted. Now I understand. You don't hate me. You just couldn't stand my presence once I stopped needing your approval. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside to let the sunlight pour in. The summer breeze drifted through the window crack, rustling the photo taped by my bookshelf. A picture of me smiling brightly with my classmates during our first project presentation. No family in the frame, but I was still smiling. A full smile. I turned around. I don't need you to admit anything, but I do need you to understand one thing. From now on, you don't get to hurt me and call it love. My mom began to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears down the face I once looked to for comfort. Brad sat frozen. Hannah looked down. No one said another word. I walked over and opened the apartment door, not in anger, not to push them out, just as a necessary gesture to say, "This meeting is over." I don't want to push anyone away, I said quietly, but if someone wants to stay in my life, they'll have to walk in with honesty, not through some performance of a perfect family. No one moved right away. But I didn't rush them. I used to be the one who always stepped aside. Today, I'd learned how to hold space for myself. 3 days after that meeting, I received an email from the company's HR department. It was a formal invitation to join the Strategic Coordination Board for a new division of the Osunra project. Attached was a proposal to transfer me to the brand management team at the company's main headquarters in Austin. Higher compensation, a more dynamic environment, and most importantly, a position I once thought I'd have to wait 3 more years to even be considered for. I sat still in front of the screen, not because I was shocked, but because in that moment I no longer felt the urge to grasp at something just to prove I was worthy. I read the email again and again, then quietly asked myself, if this used to be the dream, what's my new dream now? That afternoon, I took off early and walked along the riverside near home. The summer sunlight still danced on the water. Children played in the park. The sound of bike bells and the sweet smell of fried dough filled the breeze. No one knew who I was. No one cared that I was standing at a crossroads in my life. And strangely enough, I felt at peace, even without being seen. I didn't accept the position in Austin. Instead, I sent a thank you email and proposed keeping my current role while requesting some time to focus on a personal project. I didn't need to run anymore. I needed to stay and build something real right here with the person I'd become. The idea came to me on a Friday night while flipping through old freelance notebooks. In one scribbled note I had once written, "If I survive this season, I'll start a mentor network for young women without guidance." The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but honest. And so I began. No fundraising, no flashy launch, just a simple website I built myself, an email address and a registration form. I called the project Work Forward, working to move ahead, to stand on our own, to avoid being pushed back just because we lacked connections. I sent the info to a few old colleagues, people who had once shared with me the struggles they faced starting their careers. I didn't expect much, but just 2 weeks later, more than 30 signups came in from all over: New Jersey, Sacramento, Cleveland, Kansas City. Young women, older women, some were unemployed, some wanted a career change, some just needed someone to listen without judgment. I hosted our first online meeting on a Saturday afternoon. 8 people joined. We didn't talk about success, numbers, or titles. We talked about the frustration of applying to 100 jobs without a single reply, about being dismissed by a male boss for having a soft voice, about the fear of draining savings to pay tuition without knowing if graduation would ever come. I wasn't a professional coach. I simply told my story about the old house I'd been pushed out of, the one laptop I had in college, the sandwich I split in half to make it through the day. There were no prepared lessons, but someone messaged me after the call. For the first time, I don't feel alone. I slowly found my team. Ava, from our personal development class, agreed to coordinate. Carla helped organize online events. A former student of mine, now a developer, emailed me offering to build out the web platform. No one asked for anything in return. They just wanted to contribute. I didn't ask anyone to step in. But when I stood steady, those who needed this space found their way to it. One afternoon, I sat in my usual corner cafe, opened my laptop to check messages, and found an email from someone I didn't know. Maribel, 54 years old, a former secretary now retraining in accounting in Utah. She wrote, "I didn't think someone like me still had a shot, but hearing your story made me think I could try one more time." I sat there for a long while, reading that email 3 times over. My coffee had gone cold, but inside me something was warmer than ever. Not pride, peace, because now I knew. Everything I had endured wasn't wasted. I no longer lived to make someone proud. I didn't work to outshine anyone. I lived, worked, and helped others like me move forward on their own terms, not the paths others built for them. And for me, that was a kind of freedom no one could take away again. On Monday morning, I was preparing materials for the new mentor training session when I heard a knock at the door. Not the usual delivery bell. 2 firm taps. Hesitant, almost unsure. I opened it. My mother stood there, holding an old handbag, her hair neatly combed, but no longer dyed dark like it used to be. Behind her, Hannah stood slightly to the left, no longer glowing with confidence like she once did. They both looked at me in silence for a few seconds. I didn't invite them in. I just stepped aside quietly, letting them choose if they wanted to cross that threshold. And they did. My mother sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her bag tightly. Hannah chose a seat by the window. Sunlight caught in her hair, but her face was tired and pale. "How have you been?" my mother began, her voice softer than last time. "I'm doing well, thanks for asking," I replied, setting a glass of water on the table. "Why are you here?" Hannah looked at me, her expression unsure. "We saw the Work Forward feature in the media. There was a long piece on the Stellar Foundation site. They mentioned you a lot." I nodded. "They reached out to collaborate. They're expanding training for immigrant women." My mother sighed, a quiet sound. "I didn't think you could accomplish so much." "It's not that you didn't think it," I said, looking at her. "It's that you never looked." She lowered her gaze, fingers toying with the strap of her bag. After a pause, she spoke slowly. "I'm not here to explain. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just want to know if there's still a place for me in your life." I stayed silent, not because I didn't know what to say, but because that question should have come long ago, before I became the woman who had to build an entire world just to feel seen. I stood, walked to my desk, and returned with a folder. "This is the Phase 2 plan for Work Forward," I said, placing it in front of them. "You probably don't know, but recently one of our sub-organizations received a proposal from the Asanra Group. They want to integrate the program into their internal HR ecosystem." Hannah looked up. "Asanra? David Klein?" I met her eyes and nodded. "Yes. He reached out last week." That meeting took place in the 12th floor conference room of the main building, where the glass walls overlooked downtown Chicago. David Klein walked in right on time, holding his tablet, shirt crisp and plain. He shook my hand with calm confidence and sharp observation in his eyes. "I've been following Work Forward for the past 3 months," he said as we sat. "And frankly, we've never seen a training model that's both this effective and internally scalable." I nodded. "I appreciate the compliment, but I won't let it become a corporate PR campaign. I need a firm commitment to keeping the original mission intact." David smiled slightly, tilting his head. "That's exactly why I want to work with you." He pushed the tablet toward me. On screen was the proposal. Partial funding from Osenra, partial support from city social funds. Most importantly, I would serve as the lead director. with full control over content and staffing. I stared at the screen, feeling each word call my name, not for fame, not for status, but because this was the path I'd built, one step at a time, with no hand to guide me and no spotlight to wait in. I accept, I said firmly, but I want one more condition. Every mentor in the project, even new hires from your side, must complete bias-free support training. David chuckled gently and nodded. I expected that. We've already prepared the framework for you to lead. A few days later, I got a message from Hannah. No begging, no excuses, just one line. If you ever need someone to listen, I'm here. I didn't respond right away, but I saved that message as proof that even those who once hurt us most can change if they're humble enough to start over. That night, I returned to my apartment, saw the soft yellow glow from the window downstairs, where Mrs. Margaret, my landlady, sipped tea with a book. I opened my laptop and logged into the newly integrated admin system. Work Forward was now part of Osindra's internal network. The plan for next year included 6 more cities. Tomorrow night, I'd be flying to Minneapolis to launch the first team there. I didn't need approval anymore. I just needed to do, to live, to give, without losing myself. And this time, when they came back, I was still me, but not the version waiting for someone to validate my worth. Now, I was the one deciding who gets to walk into the world I built with my own quiet hands. One early autumn afternoon, I stood by the 7th floor window of the newly assigned office space. It wasn't a private office with glass doors or a high-backed leather chair or a nameplate gleaming with status. Just a row of shared desks where people called each other by first names, shared document links through internal chats, and occasionally pitched in a few dollars to order cookies from the bakery down the block. My little corner looked out onto a small patch of grass where, every morning, an elderly couple walked their dog and smiled at everyone they passed, even strangers. Pinned to the corkboard behind me was a hand-drawn calendar made by one of our older mentees. Her name was Mildred, 61 years old, once a seamstress, and she had just completed the online marketing course with the highest score in her group. She gave me the calendar with a handwritten note. Emery, thank you for seeing me before I could even see myself. I gently repinned the slightly crooked corner, just a piece of paper, but it held an entire journey. My phone lit up on the desk. A message from my mother, still the same kind, short, no punctuation, no emojis. Heard you're going to a conference in DC. Take care. I read it, then left it there. Didn't delete it. Didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't need to be. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door to those who once tore you apart. Sometimes, forgiveness is simply choosing not to let the wound keep bleeding. And me, after everything, I had healed. Not because someone said sorry, but because I stitched myself back together with quiet resilience. That weekend, I spoke at the South Chicago Community Center for the 12th training cohort. The faces before me weren't alike. Some young, some older, some speaking English with gentle hesitations. But in their eyes, I saw something familiar. Hesitation laced with hope. That same feeling I once carried into every new room, holding a smudged resume and a smile, trying to seem calm. I opened with a question. Has anyone here ever been told they couldn't do something just because someone decided you weren't the right kind of person for it? A few hands went up. Then a few nods, then a small voice from the back row said, I was told I was too old to learn digital skills. I stepped closer, and yet here you are today, proving the opposite. The room chuckled softly, not out of politeness, but recognition. I shared my journey simply, without drama, no need to embellish. What had happened was enough for anyone to understand that sometimes the hardest part isn't learning a new skill. It's daring to believe you deserve a fresh start. One participant asked me after class, Miss Emery, how did you know for sure that you were on the right path? I paused before answering. When I wake up each morning, I don't feel like I have to prove anything anymore. I just want to keep going. She smiled and nodded. I hope one day I can say the same. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder. That day will come sooner than you think. That evening, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name on it. Inside was a short note, the handwriting unmistakably Hannah's. No dramatics, no excuses. Just, I've found my own path, and I'm truly proud of you. I didn't know when she had come. Maybe while I was at the center. Maybe she hadn't had the courage to knock. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I no longer needed someone to stand beside me to know I was on the right track. On my desk sat an old fountain pen, its surface slightly scratched from use. The same pen I had once used to sign my resignation from my first job, the place where my boss told me I lacked leadership energy. Now, I used it to sign off new mentor certifications each time someone completed their training. I never bought a new pen to replace it, because every scratch marked a stretch of road I'd cross without waiting for anyone's permission. I no longer lived to make anyone proud, nor did I need someone's forgiveness to feel at peace. I had learned to walk forward, to know what's real and what's not. I chose to build a life sturdy enough that if someone ever came back, they would have to knock with sincerity, not with a claim of blood. I was once the one standing on the sidelines, waiting to be acknowledged. Now I'm the one who speaks first, not to overshadow, but to affirm that I am here, and I don't need to be accepted to keep existing. In the end, I realized sometimes the bravest thing isn't standing up, it's standing firm. And me, after it all, I've chosen to do just that, day by day, quietly, unapologetically, and never stepping back. What do you think about my story? About a journey where sometimes it's our own family, the people who should be the safest, that we have to walk away from in order to find ourselves? Have you ever stood at that same crossroads? Stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up to keep your truth? I believe every one of us carries a flame, maybe forgotten, maybe nearly extinguished by judgment or pain, but as long as you have the courage to protect your worth, that flame never fully dies. If this story touched something in you, even just a flicker of, I've been there, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes the greatest strength comes from seeing ourselves in someone else's journey. And if you'd like to keep walking with stories like this about family, pain, healing, and the choices that shape us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because behind every door that closes, there's a new path waiting to be told.